Sorry about the poor audio quality on this one. There's a lot of hot micing at about the 3.5 minute mark, and it lasts about 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then they get
badness based off of how much you suffer and things like that.
Yeah, but even when you use an argument like that, they just kind of beg the question as to why is suffering bad, right? You're like, I've literally followed this trail all the way down to like the evolutionary line, and they're like, oh, well, why is it? Why is it? And it's like, because if we didn't perceive suffering as bad, we would have died out.
And also,
that's all there is to it. It's not that big.
We experience suffering as bad because we experience it as bad. It is bad.
Wait,
it doesn't get any deeper than that.
Wait, why is humans dying bad, right?
Huh?
Yeah, so like basically, like we were going through the thing, and it was like I was like, well, the reason why like we do experience like suffering, right? Like the reason why we have pain and things like that, you know, you hit it, you put your hand on a stove, you yank it back, right?
Yeah.
Is these are parts of our will to survive, right? And basically that asked me, well, why do we have that? Well, it's because if we didn't, we'd be dead.
Yeah, evolution,
we'd
natural selection.
like that's not a hard one to answer. It's like, and then they go, but why did we get that through evolution? Because those who didn't died.
Yeah. No, those who didn't meet the criteria, they just died out, and the ones who did, they continue living.
That's not morality, though. But that's just
that's like the best explanation of objective morality we have. Well, that he has. I agree with him. But yeah,
what I've come.
Yeah, so like when it comes, if you want my personal opinion on where our morality comes from, right? I would say that it is. Like for what we can see throughout history, it is overall subjective, but I do think there are some core elements that we did obtain through evolution and grew upon as we continued like our civilization, right? So if you look at the earliest humans, right? Empathy was what was selected for, right? Because if you look at this through like if you simplify the problem down, you actually look at what would have happened during a small tribe of, let's say, 60 people, right? The man going around stealing all the bread and the food and all that, right? Well, he's putting other people's lives at risk, right? And the vast majority of people, they're not going to like that. The same way with like, because it comes down to working together as well, because one guy against a lion is going to get his ass eaten. But I chose a very poor choice of words there.
No,
he's going to get eaten. He's going to get eaten.
Wait, unless he has a big ass rock, then I think he'll be fine.
well, even with you have one guy. He just gets eaten. 50 guys with like a bunch of wooden sticks can kick some ass, right?
Shade. I think we can simplify this. The reason why we've developed this set of morality is because we're social omnivoric prey animals. So it'd be more advantageous to work together to kill things together and to like kill other animals together, because we're prey creatures. We can get eaten pretty easily if we're not careful.
Oh yeah, that's what I was trying to point out. Like if you look throughout like the early civilizations, this is what we saw. And like one thing I also like to point out is we're not the only animals to do this, right?
Yeah.
By far, we're not the only animals with a moral code and a moral compass, right?
Yeah.
You have crows. Crows will actively like desocialize or like kick out members of their group that takes too much food and things like that. I mean, they've been known to hold some of those bees similar. Yes, bees too. They hold things like funerals. Yeah, and then you have all these other animals that do very clearly have like a set of like a moral compass. While we may not know exactly what it is and how far it extends, you can very clearly tell that they have a point where in which they go, yeah, dude, fuck you, fuck off, go away.
Are you explaining why we do these things or why we ought to do these things?
I'm explaining why. Like, so, like, thing is, like, I'm explaining like where I think a lot of our our basic, like the most basic of our ideas of morality come from, and I think that over our course as human beings, through both societal pressures as well as environmental pressures, how they could have grown from there, right? And then it all starts with like a point of empathy, because
right. So
it's likely that during the early
you take this
what is it?
to be an explanation of why we do in fact cooperate, at least sometimes.
Yes, I think like having a reason as to like why we cooperated in the first place, right? And seeing how like from that point it can grow, because if we look at like human civilization as a whole, right? It's usually the further along you go, the better like the morality gets, essentially, like
more empathy
my question is, if you're explaining why we do in fact do these things, is there an explanation of why we should do these things or ought do these things?
Well, there is absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's very simple. Why we get this immorality from is because when it lies in human nature that we socialize. When any other animal socializes as well, right? So when humans socialize, they tend to higher their morality standards. If you understand what I'm saying, they tend to care for each other. They tend to cooperate with each other. That's the basic understanding of it. If I said,
look, I'm sorry, Shoshi is hot micing so bad, and I can't find a way to turn him down. I didn't hear you.
Shoshi, you there? I think Shoshi's
Shoshi, what are you doing?
I think Shoshi's AFK.
I'm going to
it's like a
lower
dog
Shoshi's
is licking the mic or something.
Yeah.
So, as I was saying, that the good argument I have when they come up with this objective morality argument, theists that do, I say that it lies deep into the evolutionary understandings. Well, first of all, before humans evolved into a kind of state where they hired their morality standards, for example, in the caveman era, there's, I think, some. There's some explanations that say that in the caveman era, humans used to commit infanticide. They were much more immoral. They've sort of grown out of it when they kind of progressed into a higher civilization as humans, when they had a higher intellect. And I think that morality grows with the hiring the intellect of the civilization. That's what I think. Then I don't think that morality is subjective. I mean, objective. I think it's totally subjective. Because then if it was objective and people would tend to get morality from God, they would basically not commit any crimes and any immoral acts. They would be...
Well, I would argue it goes even further than that.
The evolution of morality, I hear them describing why we do behave in a certain way, and that makes sense, right? But it doesn't sound like there's an explanation of why we ought believe that way. Or sorry,
the reason why I think
things.
So, like, the reason why I think like we ought to behave in certain ways, right, is due to the fact that like we're finding out more and more, right, that hey, if we help our family, friends, and fellows, things tend to work out a bit better, right? And like that's one thing. Like you can kind of go through history, and this is one thing that while I don't think it necessarily tells us what to do 100 years from now, I do think it can give us like a good view on how to do it, because I think we're slowly finding out more and more about morality and what works best for us than anything else. But like, I don't think that trying to sit here and go, what ought to be done, right? Because I keep hearing this thing like you can't derive an ought from an is. I'm like, no, you definitely can, right? So,
well, if you like you said, if you cooperate, etc., things work out better. Like, what does that mean? You get more money, get more food.
Well, it's very easy. So, if we go back to
just mute someone.
If we go back to like when like trade routes, right? Like, because I usually use this example because it's very big on how like we saw like civilizations kind of change how they were structured, right? So when we first started doing trade routes and stuff as humans, and we realized that, when I treat people over here nicely, right, they allow me to trade with them. And this allows me to make sure that my people are fed, my people are housed. What is it?
I would like to say something discernible. So what you're asking is that why we tend to do this kind of things to socialize. Not socialize. You asked for something. Can you repeat the question? What you asked?
Yeah. So my question isn't like why do we do this certain thing? Like why do we cooperate? Because I understand that can be explained by like our history or evolutionary past, right? The question is why we ought cooperate.
Well, why we ought to cooperate can be a difficult question. It could still be answered with this evolutionary answers because, let's take, for example, how humans used to socialize. There is one thing that they were alpha in the groups, right? They were alpha in the groups of, for example, Homo erectus. Let's just take Homo erectus, for example.
But now, I mean, it doesn't seem like, I don't know. So I'm sorry, but it seems like at one end you guys are saying it's subjective, but now you're trying to explain how it's objective.
No, we're saying how. Okay, so if I may clarify, right? I'm saying like I don't think it is in any way objective. What I think is that when we go through and we explore different things, we're finding out that if we treat people like this, right, it tends to work out better, right?
Also, you don't want to treat people.
That's all I'm saying.
It gets them angry, and people.
But better according to who, though?
To avoid problems.
According to both parties. So, like, okay, so hold on. If I open up a trade route, right, for some needed resources, and I'm trading with disrespectfully and all this, and he closed trade routes with me, right? Well, I just lost those resources I had coming in, right? And if I treat him nicely, I get to continue having those resources, right? If you look at this...
But this is just historically untrue. The British Empire in India and China and the Americans opening up Japan, it's just historically untrue that being nice always makes for better trade relations. But even if we like...
Oh, yeah, no. I'm not saying it does. Like, I'm saying like a generalized sense of, hey, like, I understand, like, there's times where in which we did use force or we did use like, hey, we need to refine the deal, right?
Yeah,
what I'm talking towards is more or less a thing of like,
force, if I have a reasonable expectation that using force will make things turn out better for me, is that the right thing to do?
Well, sometimes
very much could be. Depends on the context.
Right. So if I'm the British Empire, right, and I can force the Chinese ports to open. And have a reasonable expectation that for the next 100 years, I'm going to be like having a profitable trade route after I force them to open them. Is that the right thing to do?
I mean, I'm not sure. To be honest with you, I don't know much about that whole era of history, but depending on the context, I could argue yes or no. I don't know enough about that time frame to tell you.
But I gave you the relevant facts, right? Like I have a reasonable expectation that if I use force to
relevant to you.
And
right, I would like to know
that'll profit me for the next 100 years.
Okay, cool. Like that's relevant to you. That's not what's relevant to me.
Yeah, but is that
right? So while yes, that information is relevant, what I would also argue is why were they closed in the first place? Right? Why is China refusing to do this? Right? What exactly is going on in the deeper level of things?
Because
right?
The trade
so like it's not
one-sided.
So, like, okay, repeat that? The trade relations would have been one-sided?
Would have been one-sided. They didn't want to trade with the British Empire because the British Empire didn't really have stuff they actually wanted.
It's also not only about trading, it's about avoiding problems. When you socialize with people and you don't want any problem, well, it lies in human nature that people don't want to have problems, right? You don't want to start a fight.
Or well, some people don't care about.
But wait, in this case, I do want to start a fight. I want the Chinese goods. Am I doing something morally wrong?
That's a good question because, like, it comes down to a thing of like, what I would say is like, I would say like using force in that situation wouldn't have been the best option. But yeah, we
ought to do these things because human is valuable more valuable than animals, for example. Just take that. We ought to do these moral acts because we're evolved and we protect humans' life. I guess that's based argument for it. I guess. Human is more intellectual and human has more value as for.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then that just means
there are many things
stuff is irrelevant.
But some people value dogs more than humans. So who's to say they're wrong?
Well, those people are dumb. Those people are silly people.
I mean, that's your opinion.
Who value dogs more than human life.
I mean, we can just take it for granted that humans are more
if you look on an overall scale, right? So, like, it's like when it comes down to, like, when you have individual people versus society, right? Usually the society is going to be a lot bigger of an influence than these 10, 12, 20 people who are against it. Because those outliers exist in almost any social creature, including crows and
dogs, right? That humans are more valuable than pets. Just grant it. That just makes the evolutionary story kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter what happened on the.
Well, no, they're more. Okay, so a human is more valuable to a human, essentially because they are also human, right? So it kind of comes down to this, right? If you look at like a trying to survive and trying to keep your species going, right? You're most likely going to try and help save your fellow family member versus this random lizard, right?
Yeah, but now because
we do have a.
But now we're just back to my question about when it's good for me, like when it's to my advantage, should I use violence?
Yeah, that's cool. Like I understand. Like that's it like I don't know the actual part of that because like I couldn't tell you because I don't believe that morality is an objective in the line thing. I do think there are things that we can draw from our previous actions as what we should try to do. Right? I'm not going to lie and tell you that this answers every single possible question out there. Right? That there aren't muddy grounds in the water. You know, the trolley problem exists for a reason because it's a very hard question to answer. Right?
But this isn't.
And like that's the thing.
But this isn't, you know, like some weird thought experiment. This is just the basic question.
I know. I'm just explaining that through my eyes, right? Because I do not believe morality to be objective, right? That often that the only thing we have to go on is what does work best for us, right? What does work best for society as a whole, right? And depending on which area of society you're in, those could change, right? So if you're in a town they're finding it very hard to get like this specific resource that they need to survive, then for them, like, yeah, like taking it by force to them could see to be the only option to help them live, right? And this is where it comes down to like I would argue both parties, in my personal view, were a bit immoral. Like I think that that having good relations with the nations around you can host a variety of purposes, right?
Also, giving a human too much freedom is he tends to commit more immoral acts rather than if you put him in sort of framework when laws are too strict and harsh. That's why communism worked very well in crimes because they had more harsh punishments. And when people don't have that much of a freedom, they don't commit those kind of acts, you know?
Well, I mean, I guess like, my point is that this question
violence
about
works.
Like what is the right thing to do versus maybe what is it to your advantage to do, like that distinction is just the basic question of morality, and it's been the basic question of morality since Plato, right? And somebody without an answer to that question just doesn't have a description of what morality is, or they're not participating in that long discussion,
or at least objective morality. Because the objective morality, like the reason why, like I hold to subjective morality is because across all of time, right, of our existence as a human species, right, morality, you can't. It's hard to take just two civilizations and find that they have like the same moral framework, when in fact that's really not the case. If you jump to Israel and maybe the Spartans, right? They disagree on hundreds of moral points, right? And even if you put two that are really similar, such as Rome and the other place, right? There were still like major disagreements there, right? And what I'm essentially saying is, it's like this morality, right? This it is something that, similar to how we evolved, it's evolved with us, right? So like it's something we're figuring out a bit more every day. Like if we go back to the early tribes, right? Something like racism, right? Actually would have had a useful purpose. And I know that sounds bad, but let me finish explaining. Right? Because having prejudices and being a bit racist during the early times, being able to tell who is part of your tribe and who isn't, because you don't know who the fuck those people are over there.
Yeah, I get the logic.
Right? Yeah, it could have served a purpose, right? In self-defense. But as we grew, yeah, in that context.
And in
but
that
as we
context,
grew,
if somebody wasn't racist, would they be immoral?
I mean, so maybe not, because I wasn't really making like a moral claim there. I was saying like, yeah, it was useful at some point, right? Or could have been. And if like one or two people weren't racist, then not necessarily no. It just depends on how far they take it. So, like my thing is, I'm trying to illustrate like how like one thing that today is being used for what I would argue immoral purposes, back in the time could have existed in more of a gray area, right? Because it was extremely beneficial that you go, who the fuck are you, right?
Maybe I can.
But like as we saw society grew, we didn't have a need for that anymore.
Maybe I can boil it down this way. So we're going to imagine that you can escape consequences for whatever action you do. Okay, so you are beyond consequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you steal and kill or not?
I would argue that without consequences, we'd probably end up doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I don't mean would you? I mean the question is there any ought there that you?
Well, no, because there truly aren't any. If there truly aren't any consequences, right? Whether it be by your local lawmakers or by the effects of your stealing, right?
Well,
then no.
To the thief,
right? Like I would still, from. Oh, to the thief?
Yeah, no consequences.
I would also argue that we would probably still end up doing it. As far as like, should you? Right?
Yeah,
I wouldn't. I would argue that no, you shouldn't, because there are consequences there. So, for instance, if we follow this to where it goes, and you just allow thieves to go free, well, then they start stealing. Well, now more people are seeing that, oh, it's more beneficial for me to steal because I can get away scot-free than it is for me to put hard work into like a bakery, right? And so they also begin to steal.
I meant an individual. Like, I'm just going to take you as an individual. I don't mean society deciding theft is okay. I mean you being beyond the consequences of theft. Do you steal or not? And if not, why not? Or any other bad thing, right? Any other bad thing you might want to do. You're beyond the consequences. Do you do it?
If I myself am beyond those consequences, right? I would argue still, no, I shouldn't, because even though the consequences may not happen to me, they still happen around me, right? There are still consequences there. And they could also affect me in another way. So let's say I start stealing whatever I want, right? Whatever I want, whenever I want, right? If we tone this down to like like a smaller society, you could cause prices to go up. You could cause security to go up. Several other things right? So if I'm stealing from, depending on who I steal from, it could end up still costing me in some way, right? Because I don't necessarily
we're stipulating
agree
you don't
that.
suffer any consequences.
What is it?
We're stipulating you suffer no consequences, right? Like backdooring consequences for yourself.
Oh, okay, cool. Then you're getting rid. Okay, then if there is, because you have to be consistent here. If there are no consequences, right,
for you,
then even those that would affect no, because even for me, yeah, then the consequences wouldn't be able to exist for the store as well, right?
Why not?
So like, because like if I go in and I steal if I start stealing a bunch of candy bars, right? Well, stores are going to start putting more security on it. They're going to start keeping the candy bars behind the shelves. It's going to make it harder for me to get to, right? Well, that's also a consequence to me, right? It makes it harder for me to get in there and steal these things. Like,
yeah, so like
I think you're trying to dumb down and pick and choose what consequences do apply and which ones don't. It's either there are no consequences for the thief, right? And because there would still be consequences for the thief if the store has anything, right? As far as, and also for the world around me as a whole, right? Yeah, I would still argue that you should not do these things. But in a world with truly no consequences, then of course you should, right? Because at that point there isn't anything. There are no consequences, right? And like that's my problem with this. Is like if you look at all the consequences, right? Then yeah, there's going to be something that's going to come back and bite you in the butt at some point. Whether it be your stealing gets people mad, right? And now they just stop allowing you in the stores at all. Or it be they come and steal your shit, right? Like, these are things where in which the consequence.
So like the original thought experiment I'm thinking of here, like goes back to Plato, yeah. And he basically imagines the ring from the Lord of the Rings, and you have that ring and you're invisible and you can go anywhere and do anything. Like that's the original image here, right? That's the original story I'm drawing on. You put this ring on and you're free from consequences.
And I would still conclude that there would be consequences.
Yeah, so it's just denying the hypothetical to say there will always be consequences.
Well, no, because I see there to be a good reason to deny the hypothetical, right? Because, take for this, right? If you alone are stealing and you're doing it successfully enough, right? Then when you walk into a store and you steal so many items, right? There are cameras there, right? They're going to see their inventory going away, and it's not going to be with a regular thief, right?
Right, it's just
denying. It might baffle them for a while, but they're going to try and come up with ways to prevent this.
I think there was an experiment they did.
Because I still believe there will be consequences.
Right, because
that you're saying.
I mean, I understand in the real empirical world, of course, all of this is impossible. Yeah, like of course you can't steal without consequence. That's certainly 100% true in the real world. But I'm not asking a question about.
Okay, then so this is the problem I have with your hypothetical though. Is you're going just for the thief, right? But that's the thing.
For any act, there's no.
That would mean that any. Okay, cool, and it's just for the thief, correct? Or is it is it across the board?
Yeah,
because I also believe that because like I illustrated earlier, right?
Yeah, like I said, the original idea is basically having.
So let me rephrase this.
It makes you invisible. But like people like want to break the hypothetical, so you have to add more qualities to the ring. Does
the store face the consequences of you stealing?
Yeah, of course.
Does the store face consequences from you stealing?
Of course, they don't have their stuff anymore.
Okay, cool. Then they're going to take preventions to stop that consequence from happening.
Okay, I mean,
so I would still argue that even through this indirect method, yes, right. if they make things harder for me to get, where now it requires much more work to get there, then yes. Okay, but the proposition you're holding up is one where no one does anything.
But that's not logically necessary.
Right? No one even tries to prevent their own interests.
There's
clipping out a boring section.
It's just lazy in human nature that without harsh and violent consequences to your immoral actions, you cannot prevent human from doing immoral acts.
Well, maybe not, right? I'm not asking a question about a description of human behavior.
Yeah, no, just to give you a simple answer to your question, like, if the thief is the only one who isn't facing consequences, no, I do not believe he should, because there are still consequences that would happen for the rest of society.
And why should the thief care about the consequences to the rest of society?
Because society interests oftentimes would align with your interest, right? So, take for instance this, right?
Hypothetical. Right, like each time.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I have to state on what is right now, right? If you pull up a hypothetical where it truly doesn't affect in any way, shape, or form our thief, then I don't know, because I'm speaking on what I do know. Right? This is what's aggravating me about this stupid hypothetical, which I do think to be aggressively stupid, because you're then taking apart everything we act on as humans, everything that we have as far as like a society has formed, right? And trying to reshape into something we have never experienced, and then ask me to make a judgment call. I don't know.
Yeah, but the question is just basically, is morality like the same thing as consequences or not? Right? Are consequences the stuff of morality? Was there something else?
That's a great question.
I would argue yes.
A lot of people believe in karma, which
yeah, like I would argue yes. Like when it comes down to it, yes. But like,
I'm sorry, yes. What? I gave two options.
Yes, that would it would rely on consequences. At least our society would. Right now, if we're talking like a society without consequences, right? I don't know, because if it affects on a societal level, right? But yet the societal level doesn't help the individual, which would imply this individual doesn't live in that society, right? That's a very weird kind of way to go, because then, like, because like I don't see like how I can make a conclusion off of that, because I don't know enough about the interlockings of this world. But in our society, the way we evolved, the way we came into existence, yes, I would argue consequences have a lot to do with why we do certain things, right? The reason I don't just go off in the woods is I don't want to get eaten by a bear, right? Like, a lot of what we do, we measure the consequences and the benefits of these two actions, or this one action, right? And we go, okay, if I do this, these are the pros, these are the cons.
I get it. So, like, if I weigh the probable consequences of my actions, right? Like, if I weigh the probable consequences of stealing, and I think the consequences are perfectly acceptable to me, I think it's worth it to steal. Is it right to steal?
On a societal level, no.
No, me.
On an individual level,
is it right for me to steal?
Oh, if I have a rational expectation of the consequences? If you think it is right, then you think it's right for you. Like, there's nothing I can do about that. Right? People who think it's okay to murder, still murder. Right? People who think it's okay to steal. Right?
But I'm not asking if
it doesn't stop you from committing the act.
I'm asking, is it right?
On a societal level, no. On an individual level, comes down to what you see and what you believe. Right? Literally, because if we go throughout history, right? Hell, if you go to the person who's sitting right next to you, and you go through a bunch of different morals, right? You're going to differentiate and have different opinions on several of them, right? Like, that's my thing. It's like, I don't believe morality is objective, right? I think the closest we get to a objective morality is when we put something in to measure it by. Because it is held by the subject. Any moral action, whether it be stealing, whether it be killing, right? You put the right context in there, it can be a good or it can be a bad thing, right? And without that context...
Right, and we're talking about consequences, and I've judged the consequence to be acceptable Right? Like I have a rational expectation that
the
consequences will be
consequences
acceptable. Therefore, it's the right thing to do for me to steal.
Yeah, that's you. Cool. Like I've already agreed to that. Like that's the thing. It's like is on a societal level. No, I do not believe it to be moral because it has a lot of consequences for society. However, if you as a person,
but should I care about that?
Disregard any of these consequences, right, and also think that, for instance, the jail time you could spend is worth it, then well, you're doing the crime, and then you might end up paying the time. What is it?
Should I care about the societal level?
I would argue you should, even if you are someone who goes after your own self-interest, because like the vast majority of the time, these would still align with yours. So, if I may, right, throw up my own hypothetical, right? There's a reason why you can't have a society of thieves, right? And a very easy reason. It's because then you have no one to steal from, right?
Yes, theft becomes impossible in a society where theft is moral.
Yes. So like these simple things that we can figure out, right? Like if we steal from everyone, if everyone is stealing, then nothing actually gets done. However, if everyone is working,
but right, on that consideration, it's important to say theft is not bad because I lose something.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like that just doesn't have anything to do with the consequences of people losing stuff. That argument isn't a consequential one.
Yeah, I wasn't quite done yet.
Well, so it's like, just on a form societal level, isn't consequential.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but I still wasn't done with my little hypothetical, right? So, but on the flip side of this, right, while a society of thieves will benefit absolutely nothing, right, and kill itself in the process, a society of working people, right, who work together will get shit done, right? And we can see this. Societies where the vast majority of its members, right, are helping out in some way, shape, or form, whether it be helping tend the fields or helping build houses, right? What this does is this creates, well, actual shit versus just stealing what others created. And this is why I believe it's beneficial on a societal level, because we do get things out of it, right? You get things done faster, you get things done easier, right? Versus if you were on yourself to, what is it?
I can agree with all that 100% and still be justified in being a thief.
Cool. There's nothing I can say if that fits in your moral compass, right? Because everyone has a different moral compass. It comes down to the thing of, I believe, morality is subjective.
But I'm justified on your terms, not mine. Or, I mean, not necessarily mine. I'm justified on your terms in being a thief.
Cool. Thieves have existed. Objective morality doesn't even answer for thieves, right? It's like, this is my point. Morality, for the entire time we have existed, right, we can only see it as subjective. It is changed thoroughly, right? However, right, when, like, the only reason why, like, I would argue people don't do this because there are consequences, but, like, the thing is like, yeah, bad people exist, right? People do things in their own self-interest. Sometimes they hurt others, right? Sometimes they steal from others, right? Well, that does not align with my moral compass. If the consequences of their actions are not too big for them to commit it, they're going to do it.
No. It's not that I'm
and
going to do it.
And this is going to happen in either system. I feel you, and I've answered your fucking question 4 times now.
Yeah, it's just
on a societal level, no. On an individual level, sure, go ahead. There's nothing I can do to stop you, right? Because
are you going to post this?
But whether or not there's something you can do to stop me is not the issue.
You're going to post this?
Okay. Right, what do you want? What do you want me to? What do you want me to tell you? That on my personal moral subjective, that I disagree with what you're doing? Is that what you're wanting to hear?
Well, no. It just seems that on your view, I'm justified in being a thief.
Okay, cool. You're justified in being a thief in every moral system. even an objective moral system, it still does not answer for the thieves. Hell, it'll in some cases it can allow for it, like straight up allow for it. The thing is like I see no reason as to why we should think morality is objective. Right? I believe morality is subjective because it changes and it warps as we move along in society. That's been my entire point. And until you can present to me a reason why I should believe it is objective, then I don't see any reason to. There are things that we as a society, if you want to ask like why I believe like we don't have as many thieves as we did 1,000 years ago.
I get what you're saying. That's good.